Hearthstone Grandmasters. It's day 2, it's week 5, it's game 1, and we're ready to go. We have all done with our intro here and ready to jump into our game. First match of the day, BloodTrail up against SamuelTsao, the Warrior up against the Druid. A matchup that I think has a little bit of a... I think I misjudged this matchup at first because traditionally the token druid up against the warrior, at least in the last meta, felt pretty poor because they just had so many whirlwind effects with the war paths and back then the blood races as well that you would expect they're able to clear off the board every turn, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case anymore.
Yeah, it's a very interesting matchup, and I think that a lot of the problem that the warrior will end up running into is that the token druid is very able to just keep on refilling all the time, and at the same time it has all the burn with the Savage Shores and is potentially able to put on lethal ranges with only 3 minions at the board. So it becomes super difficult for the warrior to manage to just keep the board cleared all the time. And I think that actually having the Bone Warrior over the Control Warrior could be a positive thing for him in this matchup, because I think that being able to contest without just being 100% reactive is a very important factor in this matchup.
It definitely could be. As you can see there, the Druid basically runs no healing effects or armor gain effects whatsoever outside of the Dreamway Guardian, so it's pretty easy if you are able to lock down the board to kill them very quickly indeed. But I guess, like you said, if you are able to pull ahead in the early game as the Warrior, that's kind of the lights out position for the Druid, because this Druid runs very, very few reactive tools whatsoever. It's cut the Keeper Steladris from its curve with the Wraths as well, which felt pretty core towards the start of Token Druid, it feels like, but is now shifting over to the Swipe as pretty much the only removal. So I think it feels like if this Druid gets behind at any point in the game, they can kind of just give up right
Yeah,
now.
also what is a very big factor is that historically Token Druid has been a deck that is very good at just keeping up with having a lot of resources all the time, but that's not really the case anymore because we don't have the ultimate infestation and the nourishes to just keep on drawing cards. In this deck, he doesn't have any card draw at all, so he has the potential to just run out of stuff, and that is a very good thing for the Warrior. So as long as Warrior manages to stabilize and put on counter pressure, it should be a very good spot for the Warrior. But I think that the Druid could just have too much pressure and just being too hard for the Warrior to handle.
I think it's very possible. Taking a look at SamuelTsao's side decks as well, there's some pretty spicy stuff in there as well with, I think that's got to be the first Hungry Crab I've seen in Grandmasters at all. Is he taking for the anti-Murloc Shaman? Does he really expect that from his opponents this week?
Yeah, I guess that is a hedge towards the Murloc Shaman. I'm not sure exactly what if BloodTrail have brought this previous weeks, but it is a hedge towards the Murloc Shaman, and in the worst case, it's just a 1-drop, which is just okay in the deck. And we also see that he has his secondary deck, which I think is leaned towards the Warrior with the additional mech package and another Forest Aid and a Vargut for just additional value and additional steam towards the late game.
So for SamuelTsao on this Druid, obviously with a lot of these decks, you don't have to necessarily mulligan for early game. You can look for some of your more powerhouse cards, like maybe Soul of the Forest to stick a big board, or the Forest Aid for the late game. Is that what he's looking to do against Warrior, or does he just want the curve cards as much as possible?
I imagine that in the early game he will try to get ahead, because I think there's a very big problem if he ever gets behind. Because Token Druid is super bad these days at playing from behind, and I'm just not sure if he's actually able to ever win, because then you can compare it to, for example, the Rogue matchup. And the Rogue matchup is often decided whenever the Rogue manages to get tempo back. Yes. It's almost over for the Druid, and I think it's very much the same case here in the Warrior matchup. So I think he would just try to mulligan aggressively and hope for a lot of value towards the end after he's pushed aggressive in the early game.
Gone are the days of the Spreading Plague into Soul of the Forest Druid. That was the best. You just fall behind on purpose because Spreading Plague was so broken you didn't need to keep up.
Yeah, that was definitely a Token Druid from a different age. The deck is very different right now, and it's way more reliant on going very all in and just hoping your opponent doesn't have the answer to everything.
It's way more less good than the Spreading Plague was.
Yes. Basically. Also, we had Ultimate Devastation, 2-mana Wild Growth, 5-mana Nourish.
No, you're going to make me cry. You're going to make me cry.
Malfurion.
Oh. Well, now...
That was a good deck.
You're just saying cards you like at this point. You're just talking about Malagos Druid now rather than Token Druid.
I'm talking about Druid. From the good old days.
I mean, it's taking on a pretty different shape now. Like you said, with the nerf to Wild Growth and Nourish in particular, it kind of can't rely purely on the ramp plan anymore. Instead,
yeah, and also more significantly, I think that the fact that Ultimate Visitation is gone, and also Nourish being 6 mana. Druid has very... they don't really have any good types of draw in the deck. And I also think that the Auctioneer win condition, which was at some point very strong in the last metagame, isn't very strong anymore, because we had Naturalize move into the Hall of Fame, and a lot of the cards like Innervate just not being nerfed and gone, which makes the Auctioneer package not actually worth it. So Druid has to go for a way more all-in game plan these days and just hope that the aggressive game plan works out. But as we can see here, SamuelTsao is getting ahead on board, which we were talking about earlier. And BloodTrail is already here with a decision, I guess, with if he wants to ever pull the trigger on the Warpath on this board. But I imagine that he just wants to save it for more value. I
would definitely agree. Even in the worst case scenario here of, I don't know, Blessing of Ancients for 3 mana or Power of the Wild, like he's not taking that much damage. 6 a turn is very manageable for the Warrior. And I think he's very much hoping to be able to clear off this board with the Dynamatic instead.
Yes, I think so at least. As the same, I think he just wants to save onto his resources here. It's going to be super important for him to be able to time his removal with being able to go proactive the turn afterwards, because he doesn't want to be put him in a position where you're just constantly removing, because I think that a lot of the time ends up bad for him.
I think it does indeed. He is met with the, I feel like we're using a lot of quotation marks here, the quote-unquote punish here of the upgrade with the Lackey and the Blessing of Ancients. But even then, it's not that much damage he's taking on this turn.
Yes,
and also, he can clear up with the Warpath.
And also, he's making SamuelTsao commit another card.
Yes.
The Power of the Wild, which is a very big resource. So I think he's alright happy with this. And he just has to expend the Warpath at this point, because if he doesn't expend it, he's just going to take too much. And he's also leaving himself very vulnerable to a potential second buff, where he's outside of Warpath range in that case.
SamuelTsao pretty happy here with the Explodinator, kind of an interesting new inclusion into the deck, leaning a little bit heavily, more heavily towards the mech package, which does mean this Dynamatic is pretty underwhelming for BloodTrail now.
Yeah, it's not very good. It's not what you like to see as BloodTrail here, and again, SamuelTsao, just a smart board here, but
it's scary.
It's very scary from BloodTrail's position, because SamuelTsao with this deck is threatening a lot of damage, and just having the mechs on the board also, he's threatening the magnetizement. So BloodTrail just has to figure out how to efficiently get back on the board here and potentially gain tempo towards the towards the future. And what do you think we want to do here, Derek?
So his options as it stands look like Ziliax or Town Crier into Weapon or Militia Commander. Like, I don't think he's too afraid of taking damage at the moment. It's more just dying to a 1-turn kill with 1 or 2 Savage Roars that he's really afraid of. So taking the damage with the weapon swing, I don't think is that bad.
He's going for the Dynamatic here, which is... I guess that he's assuming that the Dynamatic just doesn't get value later, because there's so many mechs in his deck. So he just thinks that getting the kill on the 4-1 is just worth it, which is a very fair thing to do, I think.
Very interesting. I mean,
there was a lot of potential plays there. You could have also went Town Crier plus the weapon, and then set up a weapon for the future also, which is pretty valuable. But at the same time, that is not a lot of counter pressure. So if SamuelTsao then decides to magnetize one of the minions and get that out of range, it could be a bit hard for him. I think BloodTrail just wants to again fight for the board here, and if he manages to play the Security Rover, which now is a 2/6. He should be pretty good on the board, because that's super hard for the Token Druid to deal with. And if you magnetize that with Ziliax, then it's suddenly like a very big board. And I think SamuelTsao struggles for that position.
And I think that's definitely what BloodTrail was trying to move towards, because Ziliax on that turn was just pretty good. It did a lot of the same stuff that Dynamatic was doing, but the potential upside for Ziliax is like very, very high.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And I think that BloodTrail was just recognizing that versus this mech-heavy deck that SamuelTsao is running, he thinks that the Dynamatic just got as much value as possible there. And it sets up well for the Security Rover this turn.
It does now mean, though, that SamuelTsao has 4 plus the 10, 15, 16 damage, I think? Or 15 damage?
Yeah. Well, that was the kind of the scary part about his play. He left himself a bit vulnerable to burn cards. If, for example, SamuelTsao had the second Savage Warrior or an additional buff, I believe he just had the lethal. right? Or was it only the Savage
I think
Roar?
it was exactly double Savage Roar delivered lethal, because if he has Savage Roar plus Blessing of Ancients, that's 4 and 10 and
That's
4
one off,
again,
right?
so it's 1 off, yeah.
But then he had the bumps, so maybe that would have ended up working, but probably not because of the
I think so.
exact celiacs
Yeah.
that BloodTrail has there. So again, it's a bit risky position, but BloodTrail just can't play around those stuff in this early in the game, especially with SamuelTsao not drawing any cards.
And I think this sets up for a potentially very, very large upside, because obviously Ziliax having Taunt and summoning all the security bots when it's attacked into by magnetizing onto the security rover, that's actually just kind of insane.
Yeah, I also think that SamuelTsao has a decision there, right? He could potentially clear up the security rover because he knows the threat of the Ziliax, but is that even worth it at that point?
That feels pretty horrendous.
Like, do you sacrifice way too much tempo? So we see that he had a little slip up there. He wanted
a little bit of a slip up, yeah.
He wanted to attack face there, so we'll see if that matters towards the end. Maybe a bit nerves from SamuelTsao here. It's a very important game for him. They're both at a fairly bad score in the division they're in, so every win now matters a lot if they want to qualify for the playoffs.
If SamuelTsao can't get this win, it's looking pretty unlikely that he will be able to qualify at all to playoffs in the top 3.
I think that SamuelTsao's idea behind this play was pretty good though, with having the double Fourier State potentially for later.
Yeah.
He thinks that he's able to at least take one of the Fourier States, and maybe he can get the reach from that.
Good point.
And also now with BloodTrail playing the Dr. Boom, and if he's going to make that trade into the 6-1, SamuelTsao has a lot of minions on the board.
Would he just have lethal at that point? He'd have 6 minions on board, so yeah, he can't afford to do that.
Yes, so he's respecting the...
I mean, this was definitely the play. You never summon him 3-1-1s there, I don't think.
Yes, I agree.
Still a pretty scary board that can be generated now for SamuelTsao. We could see the voluntary bad trade, I guess, of the 6-1 into the 2-3 and then Soul of the Forest.
Yeah, we can't really avoid that trade, to be honest, with our current hand, but yeah, that is a good trade now, because you just spawn all the minions and then you have the Soul of the Forest to back it up. And at the same time, we have the Savage Roar for the potential burn later. So it just creates a very awkward board situation for BloodTrail to handle.
Yeah, I mean, it does mean that BloodTrail has the potential for a pretty powerful turn on the backswing, though, of Kaboom on the hero power, and then Brawl to clear up all the 2-2s as well that are left behind if he's afraid of the
I think that
Savage Roar.
I think that BloodTrail's hand is lining up pretty well here. He has the Brawl for potential removal, and at the same time he has the Clockwork Brother plus the Celiax, which is super hard for the SamuelTsao deck to deal with. He already used one swipe, and he probably has to commit resources into killing that Celiax, and that will make BloodTrail's health even higher.
And I guess to BloodTrail's credit, something that I was kind of unsure of was the choice to go for Dynamatic as opposed to the Ziliax early on. But it's been pretty clear that from SamuelTsao, the Dynamatic would have continued to have been really bad for this whole game. Like, he found an opportunity to use it on the Messenger Raven when it was at least doing something with the Battle Cry.
Yeah, he got very rewarded for that play for sure. And yeah, it's paying off for him a lot, because the Celiax is extremely valuable later. I think that a lot of the time this game can end up in a situation where SamuelTsao is fighting for the last point of damage for the reach, and the Celiax could be the one that stops that.
BloodTrail finally coming to the conclusion that keeping up with developing minions on board is no longer good enough. And I think I like this. Like, generally against these kind of decks like Token Druid, you want to use your removal first and then like your taunty cards to just lock out the game. And so I think saving the combo of Ziliax Clockwork Goblin for right until the end seems like a good way to finish this one off.
Yeah, SamuelTsao has the one-off Forest, though,
yes,
which is
huge.
The best reload he could potentially have here. So this is worst case scenario for BloodTrail here. And it's going to be pretty hard for him with the current hand to deal with this board. He does have the Celiax going for him, but besides that, there's just a bunch of tutus on the board.
He just can't fight back against this quickly enough. We could see... I mean, he's got some pretty powerful turns, because obviously the Clockwork Goblin has Rush, so we could see Clockwork Goblin, Militia Commander, Hero Power.
Then he will, I think, leave himself dead through the Savage Roar.
Yeah. So does he have to go for the Ziliax then?
He probably does have to go for the Celiax, because making a read on the opponent having Savage Roar at this point, it seems pretty likely. There's been a card in his hand for the entire game. Could be Savage Roar a lot of the time. There's also Blessing of the Ancient that would be useful.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if he could have got away with this turn going Ziliax Wrench Caliber, because then that would allow him next turn to go swing with the Wrench Caliber, Clockwork Goblin, Blastmaster Boom, which might be the swing he needs to pull this back, but that might have just left him dead to Savage Roar. But if it didn't, I think that looked like a pretty powerful way to get himself back on the board with Blastmaster Boom.
So I think that in SamuelTsAo's position now, he should have a pretty good read on the hand. I don't think he expects any type of removal at this point, because this board is super scary for BloodTrail to just leave around. So SamuelTsAo should just try to figure out what is the best play against what type of read of the hand we have on BloodTrail right now. And he's deciding to go for the Savage Roar.
Were you expecting him to save it to go for the lethal?
I was expecting him to save it, actually. I think that a play could have potentially gone for her is that it's not lethal, right? I don't think I'm counting this wrong. It's not. I shouldn't be close to lethal.
Heals up to full. No, it's not lethal.
Yeah, a play that saw him potentially could go for is that he could have went for the Fairy Dragon together with the Soul of the Forest, and then traded in a couple of the tutus and hero powered.
Oh, that's true.
And then he just has the threat of the Savager still. That was what I was thinking about, because this wasn't really max value of the Savager, which he could have potentially gotten later. Also, it's a bit easier for BloodTrail now to know the reach that SamuelTsAo has, but at the same time, he pushes a lot of damage.
Lethal very, very easily. Or, as that was from BloodTrail, oh, I thought that was the Warpath. The blueness of the card baited me there.
Also, what SamuelTsAo is saying with this player is that in the case of Warpath, he's just BloodTrail is just under too much pressure, right? So SamuelTsAo just follows up with a Forest Aid, and it's just super hard for BloodTrail to get back, and he only misses some chip damage at this point. There's no more Celiacs. So he thinks that if he does the Savager now and gets the damage in, he should just be able to close it out with the Forest Aid in the worst case.
Yeah. BloodTrail managing to find the Security Rover again, though, is pretty important. I think he's maybe just about not dead now that the Savage Roar has been already used. But it's getting pretty scary for him at this point.
Yes. But he manages to stay alive, so he's still
alive
in the game. And if BloodTrail manages to get this clear turn and together with development, I think SamuelTsAo could fall really behind, because the Dynamatic is also super strong versus the Forest State. And
that's true.
Could manage to clear off almost everything there.
Especially with the hero power. Like, the Kaboom hero power is insane with Dynamatic.
Yes. So I'm interested to see what BloodTrail decides to go for here. I'm also interested to see if he decides to respect the Security Rover, because this Security Rover is potentially super strong. I think that he has to read on no Warpath at this point, so I don't think he's going to respect that at all. I think he's just going to try to push as much face damage and just make BloodTrail have the answers.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously pretty unlikely, but if BloodTrail were to have discovered a Bronze Gatekeeper or a Ziliax, like, this Security Rover could just close out the game at that point.
Yeah, but I don't think SamuelTsAo is in a position where he could afford to do that.
Yes.
And we see that BloodTrail draws the Brawl, which is a very big draw here. Now the question is, how can we put this? How can we guarantee a clear here?
So I think like the trade and hero powered Dynamatic route doesn't really work anymore, just because there's too much stuff on the board.
There has to be a clear here, right? I'm not sure why we did that. Oh, is there? This is a pretty nice way to play the Dynamatic out of the board. This makes a lot of sense from
it has rush as well.
BloodTrail.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I always underestimate how much rush Dr. Boom gives you, because this can clear up the majority of the board and set up the taunt.
No, we're just dead on board, right?
No, the Mekaru keeps him alive, right?
No.
The double rush.
Oh, yeah, it does, it does. Oh, sorry, I didn't see the double rush.
It's always more than you think. Dr. Boom just like, it clears the board every time. It's insane. And the hero power for Blast Shield.
Yeah. Did it just stabilize her? He might have just stabilized
He might have actually just stabilized. Like Militia Commander and Wrench Caliber next turn, or even just Spark Drill. Like, he's got enough removal. If he can clear this Forest Aid.
It's surprising how fast BloodTrail actually calculated that entire turn. It was a lot of trades that happened there.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get to analyze myself too much there. I mean, I don't know if there was a lot of different plays. There was a lot of Brawl he could have played, and there was also 2 floated mana. So I'm not sure if there was anything better he could have done, but it seemed super good from my perspective.
It might have been the situation of just, I'm dying anyway, so let's throw cards on the board and hope it works.
I think BloodTrail had control there.
Yeah, yeah.
And now he's just able to stabilize. With the Blast Shield, together with the Omega Devastator plus the Militia Commander now, he can almost clear out the entire board and be at a pretty healthy life total. And knowing that SamuelTsao doesn't have any more Forest Aids or any more additional resources to draw cards. Oh, it looks like he's going for a Brawl instead.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at that because, like, if this is the last big wave that SamuelTsao can develop, why not use the Brawl now? Just because he wants to lock out Swipe as an out. But how does this actually work? If he had gone for... He could have cleared off all but one.
The problem, though, is that if he goes for a Brawl and he wants to push the Blast Shield, he can actually leave him with a Mini. So...
That's true.
I think that this was just weaker, right? Because if we played the double 4-drop plus the Blast Shield, we would just get ahead, right?
We would have left one minion alive.
Yes, and at the same time, we would have 3 minions.
Yes. Yeah, I think I agree with you, actually. I think this, like, it's really tempting to use the Brawl.
And now he just the Snip Snap
have to.
For the potential counter pressure here. We didn't say he had a refill, but here is the
refill.
That's
the refill. Snip Snap coming to the rescue. That's actually insane.
And that is an extremely big punish also, because he would have had minions to contest the Snip Snap potentially into a Brawl, but now there's no Brawl, and there's also no minions at the board. So if SamuelTsao manages to pull off attack card now with Savage Shore or Blessing of the Ancients for the next turn, I think that he might actually get there.
Welcome to the true test of the caster, which is the fact that all Druid cards sound literally identical and it's impossible to remember which one's which. Blessing of the Wild, Blessing of Ancients, Power of the Wild, Mark of the Wild, Blessing of Ancients, blah blah blah.
I'm really feeling it there.
They all sound identical. When you're playing, it's just the 2-mana +1/+1 card, the 3-mana.
So SamuelTsao is considering whether or not to magnetize the Snip Snap there. Personally, I would like him to go as wide as possible to make cards that like Omega Devastator weaker, but he wants to make one of them a bit bigger, so he has the potential of a tall threat and also the wide threats.
I think it's to play around Warpath, right? Because if he doesn't magnetize at all, it's a perfect clear for 5 Warpaths, whereas if he magnetizes one of them, Warpath does no longer clear the board.
Yes.
So I think this is pretty smart, actually.
That's correct. I think we could have had a very educated read on no Warpath, but at the same time...
Well, that's his out, right? Like,
yeah, at the same time, he could just say that he's in such a good position and he thinks that his board is so good that it's just worth it to play around the Warpath over having a potential wider board for a buff next turn.
Because if this board isn't cleared, BloodTrail is dead anyway.
So does the Snip Snap clear there? Tell me.
It's an excellent question there, Andres. So he can trade both of them now into the 4/6/1, which summons 2 1/1s with Rush, which can trade into the 4 1/1s with Rush off the big Snip Snap. It's not a board clear though, right?
It is not a board clear.
But he's not dead. He can stay alive at 1
This
health.
was also an argument for not...
Or 2 health.
Oh, this was also an argument for not magnetizing from SamuelTsao's side, because
yes,
if he didn't magnetize,
that's true.
BloodTrail wouldn't have any minions to trade the Snip Snap into, so he wouldn't be able to get this big of a player turn here.
Ooh, 3 plus the 2 is 5 plus the 1. 1 damage off lethal.
Did he miss the 1 damage this game?
Did he miss the 1?
That is the question.
I mean,
I don't know. Was it worth it from SamuelTsao's position to play on the Warpath there when we had the Snip Snap potential to make such a okay clear? Also, I'm not sure.
Could he have had a read on there not being Warpath, on there not being Snip Snap? Sorry.
Like, it could have been that he could have had a read on that too, and it could have also been that if for that there was other plays that were also good. So it was worth it towards the end, but he got a bit punished by the Snip Snap.
I mean, I think if we want to talk about punishes though, SamuelTsao's was like a really niche one, and if he wasn't playing around one card, he was playing around the other. For BloodTrail, it really feels like the Brawl turn is what led him to this position, right? Where he could have stabilized on the board much more effectively, and actually been able to fight back with his minions against what's happened.
It looks like BloodTrail doesn't have any answer now, though. So
is he going for a bomb lethal? I think that's his
It
outright.
seems like we're going for a bomb lethal here.
So that has to be all three directly off the top. in a 15-card deck.
Yeah.
The odds of that are exactly unlikely.
There's one.
Ooh. There we go. Worth an effort. You know, you always play to your outs. You always play to your outs. But I think, as you said there for BloodTrail, it was like the mid-game I think I really liked from him with going for the Dynamatic on just one minion there. I think felt like a good use of it against a very mech-heavy deck. But in the later stages of the game, like you said, I think the...
Yeah, I think he just missed that on one of the turns where he could have... Where the Brawl was just... I don't know, I would just say it was a bad play. He could have potentially cleared the exact same amount of minions and got ahead on board. And have a Brawl to use for a later situation where BloodTrail potentially refills. Or I mean, SamuelTsao potentially refills. Maybe he didn't think about the Snip Snap because he knew that SamuelTsao only played one Forest State, but he ended up getting super punished there, and I think that was the turning point where SamuelTsao actually ended up winning the game. And I also think that this kind of showed the thing we were talking about before the game, where SamuelTsao just manages to keep on developing new and new boards, and towards the end he just got there with the small chip damage.
Yeah, he did. And I think for SamuelTsao, it was a good recognition of where he was in that matchup and consistently pushing with a little bit of extra board pressure. The Snip Snap was like the one thing where like maybe it was incorrect, but it's so difficult to know exactly what to play around everything.
Yes.
And I think by making one big one and one small one, it was a good way of playing around most things.
I also imagine that there is other things that we didn't mention that could matter. By making the board like
diverse.
Yeah, diverse. I guess that's the perfect word for it. Actually, you just play around a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe we mentioned some of the stuff that was bad for him, and the specific outcome of the Snip Snap was a bit bad for him in that scenario. But at the same time, there was the Warpath that would have been very good for him by the play he did. So it was just a close turn, and I think that SamuelTsao piloted pretty well in general. And you see that the Token Druid performing with having the consistent pressure into just getting down the warrior.
Yeah, it's doing very well, and it's going to go from bad to worse here, I think, for BloodTrail on the warrior, because SamuelTsao, he can switch out some of the weaker cards in the matchup. Crystallizer, 2 Dreamway Guardians, and a Swipe in his secondary deck. And now he can switch over into having Archmage Vargoth, 2 War Gears, and an extra copy of the Forest Sade. This is switched over to... from a kind of semi-mech deck with the Replicating Menaces, the Snip Snap, and the Explodinators. It's pretty much a full mech token druid here. The War Gears as well. I mean, the BloodTrail was so afraid of these mechs that he's actually switching over to his anti-mech deck.
Yes.
On his tertiary, which I've got to be honest, I was not expecting.
Yeah, but that makes total sense, right? At this point, SamuelTsao's Token Druid is essentially a mech druid, so it's very comparable to the mech hunter. So BloodTrail switching to his EMP operative deck makes a lot of sense. I also think that the Silence and the Spellbreakers and the Owls are not bad at all. One thing that BloodTrail does lose is the potential of one of the Brawls, which could be a big factor, but he also loses some cards that are not very good in the matchup, like the Harris and the Dynamatics that aren't very effective versus the mech type deck that SamuelTsao is running.
It's going to be super interesting because this deck for BloodTrail, this tertiary deck, sorry, is clearly not directed exactly at Mech Druid. I think it's much more likely to be targeted at Mech Paladin or Mech Hunter, most likely of all, to be able to counteract the mechs there, because against the Druid, obviously Brawl and Dynamatic can still be pretty good against the wide boards that are not mech-based, like we saw there. Even the Dynamatic for 1 damage was still pretty good, just to be able to clear off the board and summon a 5/3 to swing the board back in his favor and force out a swipe from SamuelTsao. So if you had to guess now, putting you on the spot here, who do you think is in the lead with both of these players switching over to their secondary and tertiary decks?
My educated guesser will say that SamuelTsao is in the lead, with being in the lead 1-0 now.
Okay.
And he is in a pretty good position to take it down, I think. I think that BloodTrail is playing a very reactive deck now, which there's positives with, but there's also a lot of negatives with. If you have too many reactive cards in the warrior, sometimes your opponent can take advantage of that and play some type of different game plan and just be a bit more preservative with his mechs. And BloodTrail can end up in a lot of bad situations like that. So I think that SamuelTsao is a pretty good position to take the series.
I think he's in a pretty good position too. However, I think BloodTrail's in a pretty good position at the start of this game, because before SamuelTsao picked up that 1-drop there to get things rolling, BloodTrail would have just completely run away with the start of this game. I mean, he's still looking to be in a great spot. The 1-drop, 3-drop in addition to the Warpath as well. He's not falling behind anytime soon.
Yes, so this is one of the better hands for BloodTrail. I think that versus a Token Druid, he really wants to be proactive and try to contest versus the Token Druid board. Because what happened last game was that BloodTrail had nothing reactive, and he was only reacting to whatever SamuelTsao did, and SamuelTsao just got clearly ahead. I don't think this will be the case this game, which is a very good thing for BloodTrail.
And the other good news is, even if he does fall behind on board and his proactive game plan doesn't work, he's got 2 copies of Warpath in order to swing things back in his favor.
But Derek, that is a Snip Snap on curve.
Does he go for it? Snip Snap for 9 mana last game was insane.
Snip Snap on curve on a Mecha route.
So you play
You always go for it.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I know this is like... me personally, with Echo cards, I'm always very tempted to save them for more value.
But at this... I guess there's some consideration not going for it here, or also where you want to put it. Because there is 3 silences now. So
with the Owl and the double Spellbreaker.
Yes. So we are a bit afraid of BloodTrail's potential counterplay. If this was the last game, I think he would have snap played it on the Mecha Room minion and just went for the full aggression. But in this scenario, he could potentially get very punished by BloodTrail just silencing this down to a 1-1 again.
Yeah, either Coin Spellbreaker or the Iron Beak Owl, both would be... that'd actually just be terrible for SamuelTsao. That would be a huge punish. But at the same time, maybe he's thinking like, if Coin Spellbreaker does come down, he has the response of just magnetizing, replicating Menace. So it's kind of almost baiting out the silence,
this was very, very risky what SamuelTsao just did. Because he went face with both minions. So he would leave himself with no mix.
Right.
In the case of any silence play there. So that was very risky, and he's getting super rewarded for it now, but this could have turned out very differently if BloodTrail had one of his 3 silence cards.
And it's not like he's ignoring a one-off tech card, he's ignoring 3 cards.
There's
that could
also,
have come down
to
there.
be noted, SamuelTsao doesn't know BloodTrail swapped the deck. So in his head,
okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Always know that BloodTrail has the potential for that Owl in the Spellbreaker. It's maybe that he thought that BloodTrail was not supposed to swap. And
I mean, his play clearly indicates that, right?
It either indicates that or indicates that he thinks he's in a very bad position and he just has to take the risk on no silence.
Is he in that bad of a position? Like, his hand seemed alright. Like, he can go the magnetization into magnetization.
It might be that he just thinks that BloodTrail is not playing this deck and he didn't swap the deck.
Very possibly.
Main deck.
I'm
not sure.
I'm not sure which is more likely, because both seem like... I think SamuelTsao is in a decent position, and I think BloodTrail is pretty likely to switch to the anti-mech package. But clearly here, SamuelTsao, okay, he's showing a little bit of respect now to the anti-mech possibilities.
If he would have magnetized there, he would have shown literally no respect to that deck. It was also interesting turn. He could have done some other trades there. He could have preserved his Panther potentially by doing a value trade, but if he would have done that, he would have left himself a lot weaker to Warpath. So it makes a lot of sense why he wouldn't do that, even if he thinks it's the silence version at this point.
Still double Warpath.
BloodTrail is still very unlikely to have the silence, right? Because I think he would have always played the silence on the turn 3 there.
That's true. I think you're right.
So SamuelTsao could potentially develop a pretty wide board right now. The question is how wide he wants to go. BloodTrail still has potential for triple Warpath next turn. So if we decide to go Akenbearer together with the Dreamer Guardians and Power of the Wild, we will only have 1 minion left at the end of it. So I'm not sure if he wants to go everything in. It might be that he wants to hedge a bit and have more value in case of the removal.
I don't know. I think in this situation for SamuelTsao, like with his hand being half buffs at this point, I mean, I guess Power of the Wild can be a minion, but mainly buffs at this point, I think he does need to start looking at going fairly all in, because if BloodTrail on turn 6 goes Coin Doctor Boom, like if SamuelTsao isn't applying enough pressure, that's where he just starts to lose the game on the spot, because the rushing mechs for BloodTrail will just lock him out of the game.
Yeah, it's a close decision. He could also just decide to Power of Wild here and buff, and he just thinks that this board is enough pressure. He's deciding to not do any of them. And he's playing it super slow, actually. This is probably the most slow he could play it.
I mean, I think I like not going for the Power of the Wild, right? Because he obviously knows that BloodTrail still has the coin. So 3 Warpaths are available. So buffing the Replicating Menace would make no difference in terms of clearing the board.
Well, there's 2 damage more, and also potentially you force him to clear the board, right? At this point, when we only have this amount of pressure, it might be that BloodTrail doesn't feel like he needs to clear the board yet, and he could just play it a bit slower.
But I think, from SamuelTsao perspective, if BloodTrail thinks this isn't enough damage to warrant removing it, SamuelTsao's pretty happy about that, right? Because he can then just go Savage Roll, Power of the World, and push a lot of damage in one turn.
Yeah. But I don't know, that doesn't push for lethal yet, so it's a bit risky. Also now, there's a Security Rover on the board. We didn't know we had a Security Rover, of course, but this is going to be pretty hard for him to deal with because, again, if the Security Rover sticks and it potentially gets magnetized by a Celiax,
oh yes,
it's very bad for SamuelTsao.
It's very, very bad indeed. But not even being able to clear it off in one go without using the Savage Roar is pretty miserable again for SamuelTsao.
I don't think we can clear it.
You think you just have to pray it's not there?
It might be to just pray for no Warpath. Clearing it, it's so expensive every year. You have to use so many resources and so many of your minions. I actually don't think we can afford to clear it.
But if he does leave it up, Warpath, Celiax, like all 3 of those cards could just end the game on the spot.
Is there an efficient way to clear it though? We could potentially pull a lot of resources into it, which might be worth it. But we're clearing off our own board at that point, which makes... Yeah, I think we could potentially clear it. It's gonna be very expensive though, and it looks like he's going for it.
Yeah.
Which is a fair decision, but now we don't have any burn potential anymore, and we're just way slower with the Dreamwave Guardian still in our hand. Which again goes back to the...
Not playing on the previous turn.
Yeah, not playing anything on the previous turn, just
yeah.
A lot less pressure.
And I mean, it's a really difficult spot to be in because this is the kind of situation where SamuelTsao knows if he goes all in and is met with Warpath, he can kind of just give up right away. So by taking it a little bit slower, it does mean that against this first Warpath, he's not out of the game, I would say. At least from his perspective.
Yes, that is fair. He also has a lot of potentially good top decks with having bad. 2 Forest Aids in the deck and Vargot
pretty nuts. Yeah.
Together with Dreamwave Guardians.
Now, however, it looks like he's going all in here, partially, I guess, to bluff the Savage Roar, but more likely, I think, from BloodTrail's perspective.
I think there's more likely just desperation.
He
has to get back on the board and push. This is also BloodTrail's Dr. Boom turn, so just giving BloodTrail time to do a lot of the things that aren't removing the board is just extremely risky for SamuelTsao, because at that point, if BloodTrail manages to develop the boom and after that clear, the game kind of just ends because Warrior is just way too powerful at that point.
So clearly we can see from BloodTrail's... we can see that BloodTrail is in a fantastic spot here. BloodTrail, however, is going to be pretty scared because he is going to be wondering, is that card the Forest Aid that SamuelTsao has left in his hand? Only having 1 more Warpath left after this does mean that he is not able to clear off both waves of the Forest Aid effectively.
Wait. I'm a bit confused. SamuelTsao did sideboard, right?
Yes.
Because those were Dreamwave Guardians.
Oh. Which are both taken out in the secondary deck and the tertiary deck. You're correct. I wonder if we were given incorrect information there as to whether he switched over to his secondary deck.
Yeah, I'm confused now too. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I mean, he hasn't drawn any of the other cards like War Gear or Vargot, right? So I wonder if he just stayed on his primary deck?
Yeah, maybe he expected the swap up from BloodTrail and he thinks that the War Gears aren't worth adding in at that point. Which
would be some pretty interesting mind games. But I mean, we got told by production that he switched over to his secondary, right?
Yes.
I think I'm pretty sure. Either way, I mean, there's some potential reasoning by it. It's not just a pure mistake, right? Like, because like you said, if he thinks that BloodTrail is going to switch over to the anti-mech package.
I believe that the secondary deck is particularly made to be the counter warrior deck, but if he believes that BloodTrail is likely to swap over to the anti-mech deck, it might be that he made a decision that the warriors aren't worth adding anymore.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get some kind of confirmation on this. It would be pretty cool to see if it is the the anti. The mind games that can come in with specialists, because if your opponent has a tech deck that's good against one of your tech decks, you can just kind of go one level deeper than them, I guess, by just sticking
that
with
is what it did in that case, for sure. And he didn't really get rewarded for this game. He also slow pitted a bit, which I feel is a bit weirder because he had the faster build, right? In the other build, I feel slow playing it is a bit more reasonable with having the second Forest State and the Warriors and the Varga, but he doesn't have those. So I think he maybe played it a bit too slow.
Yeah, it's really tough for me. I always struggle with this because I think the situation. Okay, yeah, sorry, we just got confirmation in our SamuelTsao is on the primary deck list here.
Yeah, so he did go for.
He's going one level further. Like, sorry,
games there.
As I was saying for SamuelTsao, because I could see that BloodTrail had the double warpath in his hand there, it's easy for me to say he made the right decision of not going all in and losing to warpath. But clearly he just lost in the late game anyway, because in this situation, BloodTrail could just clear up right. Like, there's no way he loses from this position anymore. And SamuelTsao, by taking it slow, he didn't even need to see both warpaths, and he was still losing.
Yeah, this game is pretty over.
Yeah, it's super over. Like, Forest Aid off the top does not win him the game.
We're kind of just seeing the weakness of the token druid here, having no form of cardio and a very low form of consistency. Yeah. It just falls out of resources the second that BloodTrail managed to get one of his powerful clears up with the warpath. They're just full clearing the board, almost basically just sealing the game. So it was a. I don't know, maybe SamuelTsao could have played a bit more aggressively and taken some more risks. He didn't immediately get full cleared warpath if he would have played it more aggressively, but I don't know, it was interesting. We got a bit caught up there because we thought it was playing the secondary deck, and he turned out to play the primary deck, but it was a close game, and we see that's some of the weakness of the Druid showing there, and I don't know, maybe the Druid just isn't supposed to get there that much. When the Warrior manages to get the early game out, and just has the warpath together with it. It was just super difficult for the Druid, and with only one Forest State, there's almost no value. So that didn't look too good for the Druid.
It didn't, and you know, to be fair, BloodTrail and the Warrior did have pretty much close to the dream hand as the Warrior. The one drop into Clockwork Goblin with 2 warpaths as well, and discovering another security rover. He's discovered like 3 security rovers now in 2 games, which are pretty insane.
To be mentioned though, as far as I believe, BloodTrail did play his tertiary deck, even though I don't think we saw any of the cards from his tertiary deck.
That is correct.
So SamuelTsao was very weak to a lot of the silence cards and the tech cards from BloodTrail, but we never actually saw them.
So even though BloodTrail won the game, SamuelTsao won the mind games in terms of what decks you're picking, because by not switching to his mech deck, it meant that maybe BloodTrail is still happy to go to the tertiary deck.
BloodTrail didn't draw any of the anti-mech cards, so maybe he's not happy with how it ended up, and he wanted the mechs in this specific scenario, because he did draw both the Dreamwave Guardians, so he would have potentially drawn.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, if BloodTrail, by switching to his anti-mech version of the Warrior, was hoping that SamuelTsao would switch to his build that's better against Warrior, and that's what SamuelTsao was thinking by not switching over to his anti-Warrior Druid, because it's got a bunch of mechs and it's weaker to the EMP operatives.
Yeah, imagine both of the players have tested this matchup a lot, and SamuelTsao has reached a conclusion that it's better for him with the sideboards to actually just stick with the primary. So it didn't really turn out for him that game, but we'll see if it does the same this game, because now it's an entirely different situation, right? But yeah, BloodTrail got the information, so BloodTrail knows that SamuelTsao stayed on the primary. SamuelTsao doesn't know that BloodTrail switched to the tertiary, but I assume that he should have the read on that. Anyway, so we could maybe see BloodTrail swapping it up again now, potentially. do you think, Derek?
I'm weirded out, man. This is just, it's so weird to see the mind games coming into it, because I've got to be honest, with Specialists so far, we've pretty much always seen you switch to the deck that's best against your opponent, right? Because you have an anti-rogue deck, an anti-mage deck, and an anti-warrior deck, and you just switch to whichever one is best against your opponent, depending on which deck they're playing. As I believe we've got confirmation there that BloodTrail is sticking with the tertiary deck there, with the EM Preoperative Spellbreakers and Iron Beak Owls. Because I think against BloodTrail's Druid, even if he doesn't switch to his secondary deck, it's still pretty good against the existing mechs in there.
I agree with that decision from BloodTrail. I think that this is just a very solid version. We saw that in that game. Even when BloodTrail played his primary deck, both the Owl Spellbreaker and the EM Preoperative would have all been game-winning if he ever had them in the game. So it makes a lot of sense for BloodTrail's position to just keep on going with the tertiary deck here.
And I'm excited to see how it works out, as we just got confirmation that this time he is on the secondary.
He is on the second deck now? Okay.
SamuelTsao is playing, he's out here playing 3D chess, man. Like, we're stuck in 2019. SamuelTsao is in 2030 playing Hearthstone.
Sadly, we just end up seeing the Hungry Crab turn one. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, this time he is switching over to the Vargoth, Wargear, and Forest Aid. I think that's correct. I think, like, we were working pretty hard to justify his decision to stick on the primary, right? Because even with the extra silences, having an extra copy of Forest Aid kind of just seems insane versus the Warrior, right? Because if he can stabilize up until that point, even just playing Wargear as a 5/5, as long as it's not met with the EMP operative, it's not that bad.
Yeah, maybe SamuelTsao tried to just take a loss game to try to bait BloodTrail to maybe switch to the worst deck again. He thought that his matchup was that bad, so he wants to bait BloodTrail back on the primary, and now he's on the secondary. But
I think SamuelTsao is baiting us more than he's baiting BloodTrail at the moment. Like, he's running circles around us at the moment.
Yeah, but he is on his secondary now, and we'll see if that pans out for him. He has a lot more value, so towards the later game now, he should be a lot better and should have a lot of resources towards the late game.
Does lose a little bit of the early game, though, it's got to be said. With the Crystallizer, 2 Dreamway Guardians going out is the primary thing that's going to stop him from having an explosive early game. But having said that, never mind. He's drawn Mekaru into Snip Snap with the Explodinator as well. This is a whole lot of early game that could push a pretty explosive amount of damage.
Yeah, they both have a lot of early game this game. They're both with the 1-drop and the Snip Snap. So it's going to be a very, very contested early game in the board. So how would you like to approach this mulligan from SamuelTsao? He already has the Mekaru and the Snip Snap, so he just actually decides to mulligan one of the Mekarus for potential more value cards or buff cards.
Well, I mean, this mulligan makes sense with his curve, right? Because he's clearly thinking, I would imagine, Mekaru coin Snip Snap just to get a lot of pressure down early on. But I think not holding on to the Explodinator there is interesting because it does make it's like a proactive minion you can play that makes quite a big board.
Yeah, I think that SamuelTsao here with the Acorn Bearer pickup, I feel like I would lead towards the Acorn Bearer because
don't want to get value traded.
Yeah, I don't want to get value traded, and also with the Acorn Bearer, you curve better next turns with a 1-drop plus the Mekaru. And if BloodTrail doesn't have the additional 1-drop, with playing this out, like SamuelTsao is deciding to play it out now, he will always get ahead. But BloodTrail draws the second 1-drop, so
which is pretty insane.
Yeah, SamuelTsao does get a bit punished for the line he decided to pick.
I mean, I think he still made the right decision.
Yes.
Right? Because I mean, if he went for Mekaru instead,
I think it was just
he'd
a better
be even
play.
further behind.
Yeah, I think this was just a better play, and he's a bit in an interesting spot here. How he wants to play out now. He could potentially play all the free 1-drops. He could go 2 1-drops, and he could also coin the Snip Snap.
Yeah, I was looking at, does he ever coin Snip Snap, right? Because it takes a value trade. What's the worst that BloodTrail can do? Like Owl? Or opposing Snip Snap?
Opposing Snip Snap seems like the worst case. Or just him developing a board. Oh, it looks like SamuelTsao is considering a play that we didn't even talk about with Power of the Wild. Which is a very
is this good?
Interesting decision, because
this is like the one buff card in his hand. Like with a wide board, Power of the Wild can just be absolutely insane.
Yeah, that is also the same that I thought, that this was his one buff card. So he makes all of his potential with the other cards a bit weaker.
Yeah, yeah.
It seems that SamuelTsao just thinks that the approach of going just a lot of minions,
Yeah.
just keep on pushing chip damage is enough, and the buff doesn't really matter too much.
Like, this play does clearly have its benefits. It's better against Clockwork Goblin on 3 for BloodTrail. It's better against Owl because the Snip Snap can't be silenced. But again, the upside of this card could be so high.
Yes, I agree. I think that the general idea was that he wanted to be able to contest a lot of the free drops with Clockwork Goblin and Elec, potentially. But I think that the other play also did that in a way, because if we played all the 1-drops and he played Elec or Clockwork Goblin, we could have magnetized our Snipsap on the Mecha Room minion. And that would have been pretty efficiently to clear off all the free drops. And also I believe that we would have gotten a trade already with the magnetic minion, and that would have made us better versus the silence potential.
Yes. And SamuelTsao, to his credit, is playing around the silence and the EMP operative effects as much as possible. He's gone wide on the board, he hasn't magnetized yet, and he hasn't even played the Snip Snap, which would have left him vulnerable, I guess, to the silence a little bit as well. But BloodTrail here, I mean, his deck's just curving out, man. He doesn't need the Warpaths and the Brawl, because he's just winning on board.
Yeah, we see a lot of this happen last game also. BloodTrail is contesting the early game by being proactive. Makes it super difficult for SamuelTsao to decide what he's going to do. And SamuelTsao is also a pretty difficult positioner because he really wants to start magnetizing stuff, but he leaves himself weak to a lot of BloodTrail's tech cards then with the EMP operatives and the silences.
But at this point, I guess it's worth bringing up, how much can SamuelTsao afford to play around those tech cards? Is he in the situation he was in last game, where he has to just throw caution to the wind and just start playing out his cards that are best on that turn?
Also, it is worth mentioning that in the last game, we didn't see any of the silence or EMP operatives from BloodTrail. And more often than not, we would see the cards. Yes. So maybe by that information, SamuelTsao thinks that he doesn't run the anti-mech cards, yeah. So he could potentially play a bit less around it, but I think he should still have the read on it.
And that information has gone right out the window now. The Spellbreaker confirming for SamuelTsao, if he had any doubts at all, that this is the tertiary anti-mech deck.
Yes. And yeah, it's a bit of a difficult situation for SamuelTsao now because he's falling a lot behind. And Token Druid doesn't really have too much powerful reactive stuff. It only has swipes, and I don't even believe he runs the Wraths. So the only way for him to potentially get back on the board is to try to contest.
Right.
And,
I mean, he's only running one swipe now in his secondary deck. At all, it cuts one of the swipes for the extra mechs.
Yeah. So falling behind there is extremely bad for him, and he has to figure out a way to efficiently get back on the board. And you see that BloodTrail is just keeps on respecting all the mechs, and he doesn't want to do any trades that he feels are unnecessary to make, and his opponent can make for him anyways. So he just keeps on removing the mechs.
I mean, it protected the Spellbreaker pretty nicely, right? Like, it's pretty likely that SamuelTsao can throw down a magnetization on this turn with Wargear or Ziliax, which would allow a pretty nice value trade on the Spellbreaker. But I don't think SamuelTsao would want to value trade there. He'd want to push face with his magnetized minion.
Yeah, also maybe BloodTrail was just preserve his Snipsap for potentially magnetizing it himself.
That's fair.
So that could also be a different idea behind the play. And also just in general, like clearing the token minions versus the token druid when you have the chance. It was basically just a free trade, right? So he thought that the downside of giving SamuelTsao a pretty easy trade on the Spellbreaker wasn't big enough.
Time waits for no one.
So SamuelTsao thinking a lot about this turn. He is considering if he wants to go for the Celiax play or for a potential value trade. Also how much he wants to respect the potential of EMP operative or silence play. And as you can see, he's hedging a lot towards it. Something he could also consider doing in this matchup is to bait the EMP operative to potentially get a bigger minion later that he can't EMP operative at that point.
Which he's kind of done here, I guess. But I think for BloodTrail, this is a very, he's very happy with this EMP operative because there's no mechs on board, right? So magnetization is effectively impossible unless SamuelTsao wants to go for it on a minion that can't attack on this turn, which I think BloodTrail is pretty happy about.
Yeah, and I think that BloodTrail is just playing for the tempo game. Yeah, as long as he's ahead, it's super hard for him to lose. And one of the biggest problems with playing as a token druid is the forest turn. The forest 8 turns, and if he's ahead going into those turns, he should be in a very good position. I don't think he's that afraid of the mixing. I think it's more about the forest 8. So he's just trying to position himself good versus those.
I wonder.
Defend the gates.
And I think his turn for BloodTrail seems pretty easy. At least the first half, with obviously the charging of the rushing militia commander coming in. The most important thing, which I think BloodTrail has excellently demonstrated, is just keeping ahead on minions. Just staying ahead on board. As long as he stays ahead on board, it doesn't matter that this brawl is useless, because he will be able to just pull ahead every single time.
Predatory Instincts. Does that get anything? That gets him the evil cable rat.
Is that the only beast in his druid deck? I guess you're right. Fairy Dragon isn't one. Yeah?
Evil cable rat. So if he wants to draw a 1/2 evil cable rat, he can pick the Predatory Instincts.
That sounds awful.
On the other hand, he could pick Whispering Woods for a bunch of tokens. Not too many tokens, only 4 tokens I believe at this point. Or he could pick a Claw for just having something cheap and reactive. He just wants to pick the Whispering Woods to just try to contest the board maximum here and threaten potential burn turns.
Yeah, this makes sense to me. It's really the best he can go for, just to try and at least threaten some kind of removal. Because BloodTrail might be scared of this to the point where he could throw down a Warpath. Obviously, we can see he doesn't have one, but that might be SamuelTsao thinking to bait out a key piece of removal, then hope to top deck the Forest Aid off the top. Yeah.
Yeah, so how safe you think BloodTrail wants to play it? Because with the current play, he is led to a double Savage Roar.
I mean, he knows what 2 of the cards in SamuelTsao's hand are with the 2 squirrels, though. So I think, like, you know,
it's pretty unlikely.
Yeah.
Double
He's not in. I don't think he's in so bad of a position. Sorry, he's not in a good enough position. Yeah, that he can afford to play around with double Savage Roar.
Yeah, I like this play also for BloodTrail. Just developing up the weapon, saving the stacks later. The only potential punish is double Savage Roar exactly, and you just leave yourself way stronger versus literally anything else. And versus, for example, Forest State, which would have been a pretty big problem. I think that this is just way superior, and he puts himself in a very good position.
Ooh, pick up a Warpath off the top. Maybe it doesn't have to come down this turn because he's got quite a lot of value trades, but it does just mean that for SamuelTsao, even with the top deck of the Forest Aid, BloodTrail is still in a pretty good position to be able to stabilize against most anything. Especially with Shield Block and Ziliax, so even if SamuelTsao is getting the chip damage in to just go push for Hero Power or Swipe Lethal, he can just pretty easily get out of that range.
He's just slow playing a bit though. He doesn't feel the need to rush. He could have potentially used his turn to push a lot of face damage and put pressure on SamuelTsao with going Celiax Magnetizement. But if he just feels in a very solid position and just plays it a bit slow, I would say that this is a bit weaker versus Forest State potentially, because I think putting on pressure versus that is very strong. But at the same time, he has the Warpath and the Brawl, so he doesn't feel that Forest State is too big of a problem right now.
SamuelTsao in that classic situation that Token Druid always feels like it's in now, where your top decks are just so bad the vast majority of the time.
Where's the ultimate infestation?
Exactly, where is the ultimate infestation? Even a Nourish, a Branching Paths, like all the old card draw effects from Druid are just gone.
Oh, I never mentioned Branching Path. That was a good card.
That was a really good card.
Yeah, Druid had a really good cards last year. Not really too many good cards this year. Seeing only Token Druid being a viable deck, I feel like there's been no representation of any other type of Druid deck. So, and I don't think the Token Druid has been very convincing either. I believe it's one of the worst performing decks in GM in general. So, and it's not looking good in this game for SamuelTsao. So we'll see if he's able to get a comeback. I don't think it's very likely now unless he managed to get the Forest Aid off the top.
I think this is definitely his best bet though. He just has to pray there's no Brawl, there's no Warpath, and that this final effort with, like you said, either Forest Aid off the top or Savage Roar can maybe pull him back into this game. And I think this is a little bit more like it from SamuelTsao, where he realizes he is all in at this point. If the board is cleared, he's only out is Forest Aid off the top, so he has to just go all in. There's no point playing half your minions and losing just to tempo anyway.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what BloodTrail's hand can be at this point. That is not
That's fair
removable.
enough. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just a very
You have to,
poor
right?
position for SamuelTsao, and just has to hope that BloodTrail's hand is just some unplayable cards, which is technically could be, I believe, with the tertiary deck. It could have EMP Operatives, Spellbreakers, and Owls. So he went for that risk, and yeah, BloodTrail does have all the removal, so it's not looking good for him. And with the Savager top deck, it looks like
Yikes.
Jude is taking a lot of loss. But
Yikes.
to be said, BloodTrail did choose to go for the slow line here, and he has not drawn either of the booms yet. So if SamuelTsao still managed to get a back-to-back Forest Aid drop, you never know. He could potentially build a lot of boards after each other.
Okay, Archmage Vargoth coming down does mean that if he gets Forest Aid off the top, it would double cast the first twin spell copy, which would add 2 copies to his hand.
Oh, but a very big draw from BloodTrail now. He managed to get the boom, so we can play the boom together with Shield Slam. I believe this is all the boom butts.
I mean, he just drew a couple of bombs, but yes, he's still got a whole lot. Those Elix did some pretty serious work. SamuelTsao throws it down.
Yeah.
There's no way that you are coming back from that whatsoever. And even though we were talking about at the start there that we thought the Druid was in a pretty good shot against the Warrior, especially with this heavy mech package from SamuelTsao, BloodTrail just showing that, you know, the tech cards you put in don't even matter that much. The core of Bomb Warrior is so strong at curving out, it's so strong at removing, it's strong at finishing the games. It just does everything.
Yeah, I don't even think that the sideboard necessarily from BloodTrail was that mattered. I just felt that we got a bit more sample on the matchup, and BloodTrail just curled out better and was able to contest the early game of SamuelTsao with his own early game, and it just put SamuelTsao in very bad situations, and it showed really the weakness of Druid. And BloodTrail getting a win on the board now is just super important for him. I believe he's at what score now, Derek?
3 and 6 now.
3 and 6, and
oh no, sorry, 4 and 5. Sorry,
4 and 5
for
so
BloodTrail, 2 and 7 for
yeah. So BloodTrail is actually making a comeback now, and at the same time, SamuelTsao is looking pretty rough for him for potential playoffs. But he would have to win every single remaining game, and his group going crazy, and somehow a 7-7 tiebreaker deciding it. But
Yes, and his last game is up against Glory on the Mage, which is Druid any good against Mage in your experience? It's got a chance, right? At least, especially if you're curving out with all these mechs.
I haven't played too much of the matchup, but I think that it's a very good. I think that Mage is a very good position in the matchup if it runs the Sea Giant build together with the Frost Novas, because if you ever get one of the Giants out, it's just super hard for the Token Druid to deal with it at all. And if you then curve into Conjurer's Calling Nova, the game is literally over.
You can just board lock them so easily as well, and when you do board lock a Druid, they have so few spells that it's so difficult for them to pull ahead. So for SamuelTsao, which we'll be seeing as our last game of the day tomorrow, him playing again, it's not looking all too good at the moment. But for BloodTrail, on the other hand, really starting to turn things around in Grandmasters after a pretty miserable start to the first season of Grandmasters here. Going 4 and 5 puts him at least in a slightly more reasonable chance of qualifying through to the playoffs, even though I think he's still looking to have to win the vast majority of his games should he get through there.
Yes, he's putting himself in a better position, and it's definitely possible. So you just have to keep his head up and play well Hearthstone, and sometimes he will get there and secure himself a playoff spot.
But our next match of the day is going to be one that I'm pretty excited for, actually. Surrender up against Alutemu. Alutemu is the player that I've enjoyed watching play the most, I think, so far. His mage play seemed pretty inspired, a very good understanding of the anti-rogue matchup. And Surrender had some very, very interesting lines that I think that we could debate on for hours as to how he should have taken them. But against the Mage, I think they're both players who show good understanding of the way that each of their individual decks should be played in the respective matchups. And I think it'll be pretty... Did you see me squash that bug on the desk there? That was annoying.
Yeah, also, like, this is an interesting matchup. Alutemu, one of the better players, or the best performing Asia player this season, and Surrender, arguably one of the best performing Asia players in the past, in Hearthstone history. So it's a pretty big matchup, and Surrender in not very good position in the league, trying to pull himself back. And a win versus Alutemu will not only give him a win on the board, but also a very good tiebreaker, which could be very important for him now that he's not a very good position, and tiebreakers might matter in the end.
It could indeed. But before we can get into that match of Surrender versus Ali Temu, we're going to have to go to a quick break before we go to it, but you're definitely not going to want to miss this one. We'll be right back after this.